Russia has lost more tanks in 18 months than the entirety of the Cold War accumulated. Putin's grand offensive, the one he promised would break Ukrainian resistance, has collapsed. This is not propaganda. This is not wishful thinking. Satellite imagery, battlefield reports, and intelligence assessments paint a picture so devastating that even Russian state media has struggled to mask the scale of failure. Today, we break down exactly why Putin's military machine is failing. We examine the numbers that prove catastrophic losses. We reveal what this means for the future of this war and the future of Russia itself. And we show you why what happens next will determine whether this conflict ends in 6 months or 6 years. Intelligence assessments from Western defense officials reveal numbers that should terrify anyone watching this conflict. Russia has suffered over 400,000 casualties since February 2022. That's more than the total losses of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan across a decade. This is not my calculation. These figures align with estimates from the British Ministry of Defense, the Ukrainian General Staff, and independent analysts at the Institute for the Study of War. Think about that number, 400,000. That's equivalent to losing the entire population of a mid-sized American city. Soldiers who were fathers, brothers, sons, gone. But here's what makes these numbers truly devastating. Russia's offensive operations in 2024 have achieved almost nothing while suffering losses at a rate that military historians are calling unprecedented in modern warfare. Russia has lost over 3,000 main battle tanks, another 6,000 armored vehicles destroyed or captured. The vaunted Russian Artillery Corps has seen its fleet reduced by 40%. The Black Sea Fleet, once the pride of Russian naval power, has been pushed from Sevastopol with flagship vessels sunk or damaged. Every piece of equipment Russia loses takes years to replace, and they cannot replace these numbers. Data from open-source intelligence groups shows Russia is now deploying equipment from the 1950s and 1960s. T-62 tanks from your grandfather's era are rolling into battle. Armored personnel carriers so obsolete that mechanics struggle to find spare parts. The Russian military is literally running out of modern weapons. What you're seeing is a military power hemorrhaging capability faster than any peacetime military in history. And the question nobody in the Kremlin wants to answer is simple. What happens when the bleeding doesn't stop? Let's be absolutely clear about what happened. Putin launched multiple major offensives in 2023 and 2024 with overwhelming force. The winter offensive toward Avdiivka, the summer push toward Vuhledar, the relentless grinding attacks along the Zaporizhzhia front, each one was supposed to break Ukrainian lines. Each one ended in tactical disaster. Why? How does a country with the world's largest nuclear arsenal, thousands of tanks, and supposedly sophisticated weaponry fail so completely against a nation that had 1/10 the military budget? The answer is multi-layered. First, Russia fundamentally misunderstood modern warfare. Their doctrine assumed massive artillery barrages would shatter defender morale. Instead, Ukrainian forces adapted. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, small unit tactics, precision drone strikes. Ukraine turned the static defense into a kill zone that drained Russian offensive capability. Second, Russia's vaunted intelligence apparatus proved catastrophic. They believed Ukrainian forces were exhausted. They believed Western support would collapse. They believed a final push would collapse resistance. Every single assessment was wrong. Third, and this is critical, Russia lost the information war completely. Ukrainian forces understood Russian tactics, timing, and capabilities through a combination of Western intelligence sharing and exceptional battlefield observation. Russian forces remained in the dark about Ukrainian defenses, positions, and intentions. The result: Russian soldiers advanced into prepared killing fields without adequate reconnaissance, without proper air support, without the logistics needed to sustain operations. Wave after wave, battalion after battalion, thrown into the meat grinder. I need you to understand something before we continue. Behind every number in this analysis is a human being, a family, a life ended or permanently altered. We cannot discuss strategy without acknowledging this reality. Russian military bloggers, people sympathetic to the Kremlin's position, have documented the scale of attrition. They describe convoys of wounded arriving at hospitals not in hundreds but thousands. They describe morgue trucks backed up outside medical facilities. They describe cemeteries running out of space. Ukraine's military also continues to suffer significant losses. Every Ukrainian death is a tragedy. Every wounded soldier represents a family in pain. The human cost of this conflict extends far beyond the battlefield statistics. This war has created millions of refugees, children without parents, parents without children, communities destroyed, infrastructure shattered. The psychological trauma will last generations on both sides of this conflict. Understanding this human cost is not optional. It is essential to understanding why this conflict must end and why the path to peace matters as much as the path to victory. Now let's examine the man at the center of this disaster. Putin planned for a 3-day operation, then a 3-week operation, then a 3-month campaign. Now Russia is approaching its 3rd year of active conflict and the original objectives remain unachieved. The Russian president gambled that Western resolve would fracture. He bet that sanctions would collapse the Russian economy. He assumed that Ukrainian resistance would crumble under pressure. Every single bet has failed. Here's the complicated part. Russia has not collapsed. The economy has proven more resilient than expected. The war machine continues functioning, albeit at reduced capability. Why? Because Russia has fully transitioned to wartime economy. Military production has been prioritized. Social programs have been cut. Civilian standards of living have declined while military-industrial output has increased. Russia is sacrificing its future to sustain the present conflict. Putin faces a calculation. Continue the offensive and accept unsustainable losses, or find a way to end hostilities while claiming some form of victory. Neither option is politically viable in the way Russian leadership defines viability. Let's address a question that determines the trajectory of this war. Does Western military support to Ukraine actually matter? Critics argue that equipment deliveries are insufficient to change battlefield outcomes. Supporters claim that every weapon system delivered has made a difference. The truth, as it usually does, exists in the nuanced middle. Ukraine has received approximately $75 billion in Western military aid since February 2022. This includes artillery systems, anti-tank weapons, air defense batteries, armored vehicles, and advanced munitions. Without this support, Ukrainian defensive capabilities would have been dramatically reduced. But here's what many analysts miss. Western support has been calibrated to prevent Ukrainian collapse without enabling complete victory. Why? Because a complete Ukrainian victory would either force Russian escalation or create conditions where NATO becomes directly involved. The current strategy is one of sustained attrition. Keep Ukraine in the fight, keep Russia bleeding, prevent escalation, wait for political conditions to change. This strategy has worked. Ukraine has not collapsed, but it has also failed to end the war. Both sides remain locked in a grinding conflict where neither can achieve total victory and neither can afford to accept total defeat. In summer 2023, Ukraine launched a major counteroffensive in the south. Western media covered it extensively. Expectations were enormous. Many analysts predicted significant territorial gains that would shift the war's momentum permanently. The results were disappointing by any metric. Ukrainian forces advanced kilometers through heavily mined terrain defended by layered Russian fortifications. The advance was slower than expected. Losses were significant. While Ukrainian forces did liberate some territory, they failed to achieve the breakthrough needed to collapse Russian defensive lines. Why? Because modern defensive warfare, when properly executed with abundant mines and prepared positions, is extraordinarily difficult to overcome. Ukrainian forces lacked the massive artillery advantage and air support that would have been necessary to breach these defenses quickly. This reality created strategic complications. Ukraine spent valuable time and resources on an operation that failed to achieve strategic objectives. Russia, meanwhile, fortified positions further and prepared for continued conflict. The counteroffensive's limited success also affected Western support. Some NATO members began questioning whether continued aid was achieving meaningful results. Political fatigue began setting in. Here is what the evidence indicates. Russia will continue offensive operations through 2024 and into 2025, despite unsustainable losses. Why? Because Putin has no viable exit strategy that he can present as victory. Accepting defeat means acknowledging that the entire special military operation was a catastrophic failure. The Russian military command is caught in a trap of its own making. Every tactical failure is blamed on subordinate commanders, not strategic planning. Every loss is attributed to Ukrainian luck, not Russian incompetence. The institutional culture prevents honest assessment of the situation. So what does sustained attrition actually look like? Picture two armies grinding each other down month after month. Ru.S. Scion advances measured in hundreds of meters at the cost of thousands of lives. Ukrainian defenses holding at the cost of increasingly scarce ammunition and manpower. At current rates, Russia will exhaust its modern equipment reserves within 2 years. Ukrainian forces will face ammunition shortages if Western support continues at current levels. Neither side can achieve decisive victory. Neither side can afford to accept defeat. This is not speculation. This is the trajectory visible in the data, the assessments, and the strategic calculations being made in Moscow, Kyiv, Washington, and Brussels. The question becomes, is there any scenario where this war ends? The answer is yes, but it requires elements that currently appear absent from the strategic environment. 3 potential paths exist to end this war. Each carries different probabilities and different costs. First, negotiated settlement. Both sides agree to ceasefire along current lines. Russia retains occupied territory. Ukraine receives security guarantees and EU membership pathway. This path requires both leadership to accept politically unfavorable terms. Second, military victory for one side. Ukraine retakes all occupied territory, including Crimea, through breakthrough operations. Or Russia collapses Ukrainian defenses through overwhelming force. Neither scenario appears achievable given current trends. Third, frozen conflict. Fighting continues at reduced intensity. Front lines stabilize. International attention shifts. Neither side achieves objectives, but neither faces total defeat. This is historically the most common outcome of attritional wars. Most military analysts currently favor the frozen conflict scenario. It allows all parties to claim partial victory while avoiding the political costs of complete defeat. It also prevents the unpredictable escalation risks that would accompany either side's total victory. Let's zoom out and understand what this conflict means for global security. Russia, once considered the second most powerful military in the world, has demonstrated capabilities dramatically below its perceived status. This realization has reshaped strategic calculations from Beijing to Tehran to Washington. China has watched this conflict carefully. The lessons are being incorporated into military planning. Meanwhile, NATO has expanded its presence along Russian borders. Finland joined the alliance. Sweden will follow. The European security architecture has been fundamentally transformed. Energy markets remain volatile. European dependence on Russian energy has collapsed, creating new supply chains and new vulnerabilities. The global energy transition has accelerated as nations seek to avoid the strategic risks of fossil fuel dependency. What does Russian failure mean for the broader balance of power? It means potential instability in regions Russia traditionally influenced. It means uncertainty about nuclear-armed states' actual military capabilities. It means every ally and adversary reevaluating their strategic assumptions. These implications extend far beyond Ukraine. The consequences of this war will shape international relations for decades. Vladimir Putin came to power in 2000 promising to restore Russian greatness. He eliminated political opposition. He consolidated oligarchic power under state control. He rebuilt military capabilities. He positioned Russia as a counterweight to Western dominance. In 2022, Putin gambled everything on a quick military operation that would eliminate the threat of NATO expansion and establish Russian dominance over Ukraine. The gamble has failed. Putin's legacy will be defined by what he created and what he destroyed. The oligarchic system he built is being consumed by military expenditure. The military capability he reconstructed is being depleted in Ukraine. The international respect he cultivated is evaporating as his forces demonstrate incompetence. But here's what complicates this assessment. Putin has survived greater challenges than military failure. He has maintained internal control through a combination of repression and managed nationalism. Russian citizens who challenge the official narrative face imprisonment or worse. Alternative information sources have been systematically eliminated. The Russian population largely supports the war based on information provided by state-controlled media. Independent polling, where it exists, suggests significant war fatigue, but also significant nationalist sentiment. The question is whether that balance holds as losses continue. Ukraine has demonstrated capabilities that surprised even optimistic analysts. A military that was supposed to collapse in days has held for over 2 years. A government that was supposed to be overwhelmed has maintained international support. A society that was supposed to fracture has unified under existential threat. This is not to say Ukraine is winning in any traditional sense. The costs have been enormous. Economic development has been sacrificed. Infrastructure has been destroyed. Population has fled. The social fabric has been strained by unprecedented stress, but Ukraine has achieved something historically significant. It has survived against a larger aggressor with effective Western support. That survival itself represents a form of victory. What does sustained conflict mean for Ukrainian reconstruction, for demographic recovery, for political development? The war may end, but Ukraine faces a generation of rebuilding. And that rebuilding depends critically on the outcome we are still watching unfold. Let me give you the analytical framework that explains what we're watching. Russia attempted to achieve in days what it could not achieve through decades of political maneuvering. The quick operation failed. Russian leadership chose to double down rather than accept defeat. The subsequent attritional conflict has consumed resources and capabilities at a rate that threatens Russia's long-term position. Ukraine has survived through a combination of effective resistance, Western support, and strategic patience. Ukrainian forces have demonstrated adaptability and determination that exceeded initial expectations. Neither side can achieve total victory under current conditions. Both sides face incentives to continue fighting while simultaneously facing constraints that prevent decisive action. This combination creates the grinding conflict we are observing. The most likely outcome is a frozen conflict with continued low intensity, fighting along contested lines. This outcome allows all parties to claim partial success while avoiding the costs of total defeat. But we must acknowledge uncertainty. Black swan events could reshape this conflict overnight. New technologies could alter battlefield dynamics. Political changes in any major capital could transform strategic calculations. What we know with high confidence is that the trajectory established in 2022 continues. Russia bleeds, Ukraine endures, the West maintains support. Neither side approaches resolution. Let's recap what we've covered today. Russia's military offensive has failed to achieve its strategic objectives while suffering losses that will take decades to replace. Putin's calculation that quick military action would suffice has proved catastrophically wrong. The war has settled into an attritional grinding conflict that favors neither side's complete victory. 400,000 Russian casualties. Over 3,000 tanks destroyed. 3 major offensives failed. Nuclear-armed power demonstrated incapable of defeating a smaller neighbor with Western support. What happens next? Continued conflict with neither side able to achieve total victory. Negotiations that currently lack sufficient political will on all sides. Potential frozen conflict that allows all parties to avoid total defeat. Ukraine has proven resilient beyond expectations. The question now is whether that resilience can translate into sustainable reconstruction and eventual European integration. Russia faces a strategic trap of its own construction. Continuing the war guarantees unsustainable losses. Ending the war without achieving objectives requires admitting catastrophic failure. Neither option is attractive. The implications extend far beyond Ukraine. NATO strategy, Chinese military planning, Middle Eastern dynamics, and global energy markets all reflect the consequences of this conflict. What you're watching is the most significant military conflict in Europe since World War II. The outcome will determine European security architecture for generations. The lessons will reshape military doctrine worldwide. The human cost will scar both nations permanently. If you found this analysis valuable, hit the like button. Your support helps this channel grow and reach more people seeking understanding of complex geopolitical situations. Comment below with your thoughts on what happens next. I read every response. If you want more comprehensive coverage, check out these videos exploring related topics. One covers NATO expansion and its strategic implications. Another examines military technology transforming modern warfare. A third analyzes the energy geopolitics driving global conflict. Subscribe now so you never miss the analysis that helps you understand the world. Every new video delivers the depth and clarity that separates informed viewers from those simply consuming headlines. The story of Russia's failing offensive is not just about military tactics or battlefield statistics. It's about how power works in the modern world, how information shapes perception, how alliances matter more than weapons, and how the decisions made in capitals thousands of miles away can determine whether peace returns to a region or whether the grinding conflict continues. Stay informed, stay critical, stay engaged. We'll see you in the next one.